What's up? Welcome back. This is the 8th video in the SEO fundamental series for local service businesses. In this video, we're going to be talking about technical SEO, what it is, why it's important, and most importantly, some of the optimizations that you can make, some of the most important optimizations you can make. So let's get into it. If you've been following along so far, you should have done your keyword research. You should have done your on-page SEO, your off-page SEO, like we discussed in the last video. And you can see this diagram here. SEO fundamentally is these three things coming together. There's on-page, off-page, and then finally the technical SEO here. So I've put together a list, just a high-level list of some of the things that I consider to be, some of the major things that you can do from a technical SEO perspective. And these should be kind of low-hanging fruits or things that you can implement realistically to your website so that you can optimize better. So first things first is understanding if you have a www or a not www website. When you register your domain and when you start pointing the domain to the correct version, you'll determine whether you want a www or not www. For example, Miro.com, this is just the app that I'm using for the whiteboard here. You can see that they're not using a www domain name. Therefore, if I was to type in www.miro.com, it's going to redirect me to the correct page. You just want to make sure that you're redirecting both the users and the search engines to the correct version. And you do this by going to Search Console or when you're registering your website with any search provider, you're registering the correct version of the domain name. Just make sure that you're redirecting to the correct version. So SSL certificates here. SSL certificates were a thing that came into existence as a ranking factor back in 2014, I believe. And in 2014, Google kind of made this blanket rule saying that if your website was not secure with an SSL certificate, they were going to not show you in the ranking. So what that looks like is this. I was just doing some research here. We have Cheng's Acupuncture and Herb out in Atlanta somewhere, but you can see that on Chrome, damn, you can't really see it because it's a lower resolution. But if you see here, it says not secure up here, and it'll say your connection to this site is not secure. Sometimes before you even hit the actual web page, they'll show you a giant kind of warning in the middle of the page saying, do you want to continue because the website is not secure? You can obviously kind of see how that might affect your search performance or your website's performance when a visitor has to go through that every single time they find your website, if they even do, because again, Google is not going to show websites really that don't have an SSL certificate anymore. So you should get one for sure. A lot of hosts have this as a standard. We do at Pepper Sites, but I know places sometimes like GoDaddy will charge for this. Two things that you should look at really. One thing you should look at is Let's Encrypt. If you have your own website set up already and you want a solution that's free, you should look at Let's Encrypt. That's a good certificate provider. The next thing is optimizing for page speed, and this is a big one. So obviously Google wants to serve fast websites to their users. They don't want people to be hanging around and then thinking that Google is serving them bad results. So site speed and page speed are a huge ranking factor, probably the most important ones in terms of technical SEO. And how you achieve this is to make sure that you're compressing your images. First of all, use image compressors. There's WordPress plugins for that. I believe Squarespace and Wix, they might offer some sort of image compression if you're uploading high quality images, but make sure if they're not, just make sure you're compressing them beforehand. There's websites like Tiny PNG or something like that, Tiny JPEG, where you get to upload your images here and it'll compress it so that your websites are faster, like they say. Also, take some time to minify and compress, optimize your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're building a website from scratch, just try to compress the code. Don't use miscellaneous or extraneous code. Really try to keep it lean if you can, and that'll improve the page speed. If you can, use a content distribution network, a CDN. This is things like what we use here at Pepper Sites, Cloudflare. And CDNs are essentially services that will serve your content from different servers that are caching your website, so that people don't have to load your website every single time if there were no changes made. So this content distribution network will save your content literally on its distribution network, and then if somebody were to access your site, they'll serve it from the nearest possible location, so that time to load is very short, as short as possible. And the last thing, kind of tying into the cache, is that's tying into the CDN, is the cache. The cache is just a system to save pages on your website, so it's able to be loaded quicker. If there were no changes on your website, or even if there were changes, if you're serving a cached version, that's just a saved down version of the page. So you can serve your website without loading it from scratch every single time. All right, so these are kind of the main things I would focus on for optimizing your page speed. And again, page speed is probably the one metric that I would really focus on if you're doing technical SEO. There's good tools to test your page speed. One of them that we use is gtmetrics.com. And another one is, and another one is Pingdom speed test, I believe. Pingdom speed test, and yeah, these are the URLs. So you can, you can, sorry about that. You can go visit them by pausing the video if you'd like. So these are the two URLs to test your website speed. All right. So and then in that website test, and that if you plug in your website here, they'll offer suggestions on how to improve your website speed. A lot of the times it's going to be one of these three things: either minify or compress your images, minify your code, use a CDN, or use a cache for specific pages. So that's why I mentioned these three things here. And then moving on, the next thing that I'd focus on is making sure that you have an XML sitemap. A sitemap is just literally a map of your website outlining every page, so that the robots, the spiders, can come and crawl your website easily. It's just laying out a table of contents, if you want to think about it like that, for the search engines to go through page by page and understand what your website is about. But in addition to XML sitemaps, you need a robots.txt, and this just allows the crawlers, Google's crawlers or any other crawlers, to come and actually crawl your website. If you have a robots.txt file that is not set up correctly, then you may be blocking the crawlers from actually accessing your site in the first place, which might hurt with your indexing and actually showing up on the search engine results. The next thing is site structure. The site structure, you just need to make it logical and make it like a hierarchical structure. So, we'll get into site structure in another video because it is very important. But just think about it like this. If you have a homepage and then you have 5 different services that you're offering, just make sure those 5 different services are actually kind of underneath a services tab on your navigation. And if you wanted to make that site structure a hierarchical site structure, that's what I would do. There's also flat site structure. So let's just draw it out like this. So you have your homepage, and then you have just different paths that the user can take. One might be your services, one might be your locations, one might be your contact page, and one might be an about page or something like that. From your services, you just want to branch out again into the different service pages you have. Same thing with the locations. You just want to branch out to the different locations. Don't just have everything kind of in a random order, in illogical order that makes it very confusing for both the visitor and for the crawlers to actually analyze your site. And then in tandem with this is the URL structure. So if you just make the URL structure very lean and optimized. So don't have things like, if I was doing a URL, don't have things like, for instance, like website.com/ blog and a bunch of numbers / a bunch of numbers, product, category, and then blog name. or something like that, right? Just make sure your URLs aren't like crazy like this. If I was to simplify this out, I'd get rid of the numbers here. Sometimes a lot of the numbers are like unique identifiers that these providers, like website providers, will automatically append to your URL. So I would just not even do this. If I was doing e-commerce, right, I would do this like a category and then product name. E-commerce URLs can get very crazy, so just make sure you're optimizing for that. But in this instance, for local service businesses, what we do is basically like services/service name. Or if you're doing a blog, in that example we were doing, just simply put blog / the actual post name, what the name of the post is. And don't include any other dates, modifiers, numbers. You want to keep the URL as clean as possible because, again, the URL is very important in terms of optimizing for the target keywords that you've identified in the keyword research phase. The next thing is duplicate content. Duplicate content you can get penalized heavily for this. Duplicate content it comes into play. Let's say when you're doing service pages or location pages, and you're doing a plumbing. We keep coming back to this, but let's say you're doing plumbing in 10 different locations. All you're doing is using that same exact content across 10 different pages and just changing up the URL or changing up the header tag. That's not good. It's considered spam. It's going to confuse the crawlers because they're going to think they're crawling the same exact page. So make sure you're modifying those pages and not producing duplicate content across your website. Same thing. So now moving on to redirects. This kind of ties into, I would say, even site structure and URL structure here. So redirects is we're talking about 301 redirects. If you have a page or something like a URL structure that might have changed over time, let's say you were simplifying your URLs, but something you had a blog post that had that crazy URL structure ranking. When you're redoing your URL structures into a cleaner URL, just make sure that your 301s are working and leading visitors to the correct new URL. What happens is sometimes you forget to do this, and this is going to lead to a 404 error, and that is going to indicate to Google that this page doesn't exist anymore, which it doesn't, and it's going to start de-ranking you based on those factors. And then also, try to optimize your redirects a little bit as well. If you're having redirect to redirect to redirect, for instance, if this was going to go to another changed URL or another changed URL, just make sure you can understand where the actual traffic is coming from. That way you can optimize it and make sure that you're pointing it to the correct URL just once. You don't want to have chain redirects like that. And then second to last is mobile responsiveness. This is a given now. If you take a look at the statistics, I believe the majority of people browsing websites now are from mobile devices. So you need a mobile first approach to your design first and foremost, but make sure that your website's mobile responsive. One thing that I would just keep my eye out for is making sure that your overflow is hidden. That means, like, sometimes when you're presenting pages on a phone, it could be scrolling to the right and left when it really shouldn't be. It should really only be scrolling up and down. That can really affect mobile responsiveness and usability. So make sure your font sizes are okay, that the elements are not too close together so that it's easier for somebody to click on a phone, which is a smaller screen. A good thing to do is to plug your site into Search Console, and then Search Console will start giving you some of these warnings about your mobile responsiveness. So just go through those warnings and make sure that you're addressing each one of them if you have any issues with that. And the last thing is structured data. Structured data is, if you go to schema.org, you can introduce schemas structured data to individual pages on your website. This is just supplementary data that you can give to Google and search engines to describe what the page is about a little bit more. So the major ones when we're talking about local service businesses would be a local business schema, which gives them more information about the website, the business, who you are, what you do, where you're located. So Google can use that and understand that you might be looking to rank for specific things, specific services related to your business. So technical SEO is probably the one thing that is, again, a little bit more technical than a lot of the other ones. So you might need a little bit more technical knowledge to get this implemented into your website. But the good thing is you should choose a provider or a website designer that can actually implement these things for you. That's what Pepper Sites does. We take care of all the on-page and all the technical elements, as well as the off-page elements as well. So you have a complete solution to your SEO needs. And in the next videos, I think since we've kind of covered some of this stuff high level, what we're going to start doing is we're going to start diving into some of these things a little bit more in detail so that we can start looking at some real life examples, some use cases, some case studies, and really understand what some of these on-page, off-page, and technical SEO elements look like in practice. So I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching if you've been watching this far. And see you in the next one. Thank you.